So I was on Reddit the other day on the SCP Secret Lab subreddit, and I saw a post by a user named Rifeth that was an Iceberg for Secret Lab in general, and I thought it was really cool and I wanted to make a whole video on it. And if you don't know what Secret Lab is, if you're new to the channel, it's essentially a multiplayer game that is set in the SCP universe, and this video will kind of serve as a little bit of an introduction to the game and then a little bit of an intro to the SCP universe overall. And basically the premise is there's this super duper top secret laboratory that houses these anomalous entities that threaten the very fabric of humanity, and one day they all escape. And so you either play as one of these monsters trying to not let people escape, or you play as an escaping personnel trying to get out of the facility. So let's just jump into it. On level 1, we're going to be starting off with basically some very common knowledge theories, or just things that if you've played any amount of games in SCP Secret Lab, you'll sort of have heard of these normally, and you might not even consider these any sort of conspiracy theory in general. Light containment zone is farther down than heavy containment zone. So basically in the game in Secret Lab, there are different elevators that get you from light containment zone to heavy containment zone, and then you have to get through a secure checkpoint to get from heavy to the entrance zone, and then another set of elevators from entrance zone to the surface zone for you to escape as one of these facility personnel. And then on these elevators, right next to them, there's a screen that shows you what floor the elevator is on. And in the game, it actually shows that light containment is above heavy containment zone. However, some players have pointed out, if you go from light containment zone down to heavy containment zone and then over to entrance and then back up to surface zone, does that mean that the light containment zone is above ground, or where would that put it exactly? So a lot of people think that light containment zone is actually beneath heavy containment zone, and either the facility is purposefully misleading its personnel, or the devs have just made a mistake graphically or something. So I actually went into the game myself and then loaded up a server where I've got admin permissions on, and I could see my coordinates for my player in the game. In particular, I was able to see my Z coordinate, which essentially, non-technical definition, this just means how high or low your character is in a given game world. And when I looked at the map, it was actually quite interesting. Light containment zone is on the 0 coordinate for the Z axis, which means it's just at 0. And then 1000 below that is heavy containment zone. And then 1000 above 0 is entrance zone. So really what it looks like is you're here, and then you go down 1000 feet to heavy containment all the way to entrance, and then the elevator shoots you up 2000 feet to surface zone, really high up above light containment. So that's really what it looks like. Peanut. So this one's pretty simple. Peanut was just a nickname given to SCP-173 by the community because, well, I guess he looks like a peanut. It's kind of, that's it. You know, that's the crazy conspiracy theory. As I said, a lot of these on the first tier are kind of sort of just normal things that people know about. I will say though, patch 11 is currently coming out for the game, and in the beta servers, Peanut has been completely replaced with a new model for copyright purposes. And essentially the community is split into 2 camps, one where they call him Matthew now, and one where they call him Walnut. Don't ask me why people call him Matthew. The devs just sort of said that's what his name is now. And I kind of personally like it. I look at him and I see, you know, oh, that's a Matthew. He looks handsome. He's dapper. That's Matthew. So yeah, that's kind of that. Larry. All right, so this one is kind of interesting. Larry at first blush seems pretty straightforward, but there's actually quite a lot more on this one. If you've played Secret Lab for more than a few rounds, you'd know the nickname for SCP-106 is Larry, or also Radical Larry, but not a lot of people know where this name actually came from. And I'd personally heard a lot of different stories as to where Larry and Radical Larry came from. So I decided to do some digging. In an older story for SCP-106, a sort of extended universe story for him, he is a World War I veteran by the name of Corporal Lawrence. And so this is where the name Larry comes from. But the idea of Radical Larry actually dates back to all the way back to 2011 when this meme came out on 4chan boards depicting a lineup of individuals, and number 7 is a guy named Radical Larry, who seems to have abilities that depict exactly what 106 does. And so people were like, whoa, this guy's named Larry and he does what Radical Larry does, so we're just gonna call him Radical Larry. And that's the origin of Radical Larry. And then Markiplier later popularized it when he did his playthrough series of SCP Containment Breach, calling 106 Radical Larry. So yeah, that's cool. Coin. Okay, so this is a pretty easy one. For the longest time, the coin was an unused asset in Secret Lab. It was a holdover of when this game was basically just a multiplayer mod for the single player SCP Containment Breach. You couldn't do anything with it. It wouldn't even spawn in normally on a map, but there are some servers, some modded servers, where the coin would spawn and you could use it to like jam a door somehow or upgrade it to key cards like you could do in Containment Breach. Interestingly enough, though, this coin has made a bit of a return in the Parabellum update. This is patch 11 of the game, which is currently on beta servers. The coin is in the game and you can find it now actually spawning in the map. And when you pick it up, you could actually flip it and it'll either land on heads or tails, which is super, super cool. And now a coin will always spawn in 106's chambers. So when 2 people are going in his room to recontain him, and one person has to sacrifice themselves to the femur breaker while the other one presses the button to recontain him, you can now flip a coin to decide who goes into the machine. SCP-914. Now, this one is really confusing for me, not because it's some esoteric or hard to find information about it, but because SCP-914 is in the game and it's actually a main part of the gameplay. You go to 914, which is a giant machine that you can upgrade items to get things like better key cards, to get through security checkpoints, to get out of the facility, and to upgrade weapons and stuff. And it's like, it's part of the game. There aren't even really any super duper secret mysteries or theories I could find about 914. So yeah, it's just kind of there. All right, and now we're going to move on to a level 2 of the Iceberg, which actually starts to have some a bit more interesting theories inside of it, which I'm really excited for. Tutorial. So tutorial refers to the in-game class known as the tutorial class, not the mysterious tutorial levels, which we'll get into a little bit later on. And from what I've gathered, this is just talking about the tutorial class, which, like the coin, is something that's in the game but not normally playable right now. As it stands, server admins and the game devs will use it when they want to spawn themselves into a round and act as a sort of neutral team without having to spawn on one team or the other. And in the current build of the game, when you kill someone that's a tutorial class, they will ragdoll as a D-boy in the game, which we'll get back to why that is a little bit later in the Iceberg. But in the current beta for patch 11 Parabellum, this has been patched. So when you kill a tutorial, he actually ragdolls as a tutorial now, which is pretty cool. Cup. So the cup is a holdover from when the game was just a multiplayer version of Containment Breach, again, much like the coin. But the cup has now been completely removed from the game files. You can't even spawn it in if you've got access to the admin panel or anything. It's completely removed from the game files altogether. Some people think that the cup will make this glorious return when the game devs at Northwood decide to add SCP-294 into the game, which is a coffee machine that can serve the user anything they could possibly think of. But like tutorial levels, that is a whole topic we're going to get into in a deeper level of the Iceberg. SCP-330. So SCP-330 is the Halloween candy bowl that was added for only a few days in the 2020 Halloween build of the game. Basically, this is something that would spawn in light containment in the O12 room, right next to where the keycard always spawns to help get out of light containment. And it was a bowl of Halloween candies where the player could only take up to a maximum of 3 candies at a time. And these ranged from candies that could make you super fast for a time when you eat them. They would give you extra health. They would help you regenerate health. But there was one candy in particular that was very contentious, to say the least. It was the pink candy, where when you ate it, you instantly exploded and blew up as if you yourself was a grenade. This was obviously very overpowered, as normally in Secret Lab, the SCPs are monsters that are very hard to kill and take a lot of effort to take them out. But you could just have a bunch of D-boys run up to them and blow themselves up. And that was it. So that was awesome. Also, as mentioned earlier, you could only take up to 3 candies. And when you took more than 3 candies, your character's arms would pop off and you would slowly die from loss of blood, which again was super awesome. All right, now we move on to level 3 of the Iceberg, which basically, from what I could tell, mainly goes into cut content for guns, weapons, and other items in the game. Logicer is the worst weapon. So this one is less of a conspiracy and more just like it's kind of true. The Logicer is the gun that all Chaos Insurgencies spawn in with when they jump into the game, and it really sucks. You can't aim down the sight like you can with every other game. It's very inaccurate and takes forever to reload, and yeah, it's not really a conspiracy. Like, it's the worst gun. Water is wet. Now, as a note, the Logicer is completely reworked in the new patch 11 beta, and this is a change that a lot of people are excited about. Scorpion. So the Scorpion, actually spelled with a K and not a C, was the old version of the MP7, which is the gun that facility guards spawn with when the match first starts. It was based off of an old Czechoslovak machine pistol used during the Cold War, and the gun model itself was kind of dated, and the gun itself wasn't good, and so it just got replaced by the MP7, and that's that. Smoke grenades. So smoke grenades are also an old item in Secret Lab that have been removed. Basically, they were grenades that when thrown, they would create a big puffy cloud of smoke and you couldn't see through them. And it was really cool from a tactical standpoint, but the devs removed it from the game because it would really affect people's frame rates and it just was really buggy and broken. So it's not really in the game anymore. However, a lot of people, myself included, are hoping that the smoke grenade makes an awesome comeback one day sometime soon, maybe not too far in the future, because patch 11 is the Parabellum update, also known as the gun update, and if you played the beta, you would notice that there are no grenades of any type in the game, no flashbangs or frag grenades, which normally are still in the Secret Lab game. And so a lot of people are thinking they're reworking the entire grenade system, which means that they're going to be re-adding the smoke grenades and then also re-adding the plasmatron grenades, which aren't even on this Iceberg, but god damn it, those need to come back because they were so stupid, but god, they were cool. Locker searching. Locker searching refers to earlier builds of the game where lockers were just things you would walk up to and hold E, and then your character would just take some item from them. They wouldn't open up like they do now, where you just press E and the door opens up and you could just take whatever items you want from the locker. It was a much more basic version of what we have now. The next tier of the Iceberg is what I like to call the, oh hey, data miners exist and found this thing in the game files, and whoa, it's not in there anymore. That's weird, because that's everything in this tier basically. Unused MTF/D class models. So this one is a reference to the fact that there exists in the game files, or at least did at some point, unused models for the Mobile Task Force and the D class personnel. Theories range from being cosmetic skins you can unlock or purchase to early iterations of a scrapped class system in the game. However, like a lot of stuff on the Iceberg, they've since been removed from the game files. And the scrapped class system is actually something we're going to come back to in a little bit. Roasted achievement. The roasted achievement is an achievement that was found in the game files, but was just never enabled for players to use. And the description for the achievement read, survive a hit from a Tesla gate as an SCP. And so basically in heavy containment, there are Tesla gates throughout the map that your character can walk through, and as long as they're not being careless, you won't get zapped and killed by the Tesla gate. But the problem with this is that basically every SCP in the game, if they walk through a Tesla gate and accidentally get hit, you won't ever get killed in one hit by a Tesla gate. And so not only is this achievement easy to get, it would almost be impossible not to get this achievement, which is probably why they scrapped it from the game, because it's kind of like, hey, have you played one round of SCP Secret Laboratory before? Here's an achievement, buckaroo. SCP 457. Now, SCP-457 refers to the Burning Man, an entity composed entirely of fire that ranges from a flame no bigger than that of the head of a matchstick to the size and shape of a fully grown human being, and potentially even larger if given enough fuel. There were a few files data mined long ago that referenced Bernie, the SCP-457, as potentially being a new SCP added to the game that players could play as. However, these files have since been completely removed, and there's no reference to 457 in the game any longer. If you ask me, I think it would be really cool to add a new SCP that has this concept of the more people he, takes out, the stronger he grows, and then the more damage dealt to him from, I don't know, sources like a sprinkler system or a fire extinguisher, he'd get weaker and weaker. I think it would really mix some things up in the SCP lineup and add a bit of curveball to the gameplay, in my opinion. SCP-294. So SCP-294 is the coffee machine. And this is actually something that has existed in the game for a while, although you couldn't really do anything with it in game. It would spawn in the cafeteria room in Entrance Zone. However, since the cafeteria room no longer spawns when the map generates the rooms, by extension SCP-294 also no longer spawns and is gone as well. Now, SCP-294 in the lore can give the user a literal cup of anything. In a story, one test subject asked the machine for, quote, a cup of Joe, and at which point a nearby SCP staff member named Joe collapsed, and what came out of the machine was what they described as a mixture of sweat, blood, and bodily fluids that, when tested, all seemed to have come from Joe. And it's theorized in-game this would work by having the player go up to the machine with a coin and a cup, and basically they put these two things in the machine and it would come out maybe like SCP-330 with a different colored drink that would make you run really fast or give you extra health or literally blow you up. I don't know, it's a great idea in my opinion. I think they should add it. Honestly, it would add quite a lot more flavor, and especially if this thing is placed in Entrance Zone, I think it'd make that zone more interesting, because basically all Entrance Zone is the barrier between the very fun, heavy containment zone that's got all the cool stuff, and then the boring surface zone, which is just kind of where people will spawn in, and it's like, okay, old Chaos Vehicle. The old Chaos Vehicle was a very old asset in the game that, as the name implies, was what the Chaos Vehicle that drops off spawning Chaos Insurgency used to look like. That's about it. It's the truck that spawns Chaos. It used to look different, and that's the thing. Ta-da! Okay, so the next tier we're jumping into is the 5th tier for the Iceberg, and is where things start to get really good and actually has some stuff that I think not a lot of people really knew about the game. SCP-096 Unused Grapple Animation. This is actually a really interesting one. So while Northwood was working on the rework for SCP-096, that came out late last year, data miners found an unused animation for 096 where he would pick up somebody and then smash them on the ground, presumably instantly destroying them in one hit. However, this was probably scrapped when Northwood remembered, oh wait, SCP-096 already one-shots people, and so other than style points, this is just a slower way to take people out, and it's kind of like, oh, okay. And so they probably removed it. I think it'd be cool if they kept it, but oh, that's that. February, March, February, January, placeholder asset. Now, this is probably one of my favorite months ever, and while I can't talk about this directly, I'm just going to say that it's very fun that the only reference to this thing in Secret Lab is as a secret dev placeholder picture asset for the old debug menu in the game. And it's only ever referenced in the game files as --line 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 --. And if you don't understand anything that I'm talking about here, there's a great video by Volgan, which I've linked in the description down below. Check it out, because it's really one of my favorite SCPs. It's one of my favorite in the world. Shooting range. So the shooting range was something in earlier builds of the game that let you test out all the weapons that were in the game at the time. It was part of the tutorials for the game, which, hey look, we're about to talk about right now. Tutorial levels. All right, so this is kicking off the second to last level of the Iceberg, and as alluded to in other levels of the Iceberg, there are tutorials, which are an in-game class, and then there are the tutorial levels, which were a set of tutorial levels in Secret Laboratory. And these scrapped single-player modules would guide someone through the basic mechanics of the game, including how to pick up items, how to use key cards, use weapons in the firing range, and even how to upgrade keycards and other items in 914, all from the perspective of a D-boy. And that's why in the current build of the game, when you get shot and killed as a tutorial, you'll ragdoll as a D-boy. It's just a bit of a dev oversight. However, this was removed a few years back from Northwood. As they stated, it was hard to keep the tutorial up to date whenever they changed assets, updated game mechanics, and so on. I personally suspect the tutorial levels will make a return in later builds of the game as they get the game to a more finalized and fleshed out build. Unused micro HID model. So the unused micro HID model was the original model that the micro HID had before we got the gun in the game. Basically, the way we have it now is it's this big gun that shoots electricity, laser stuff that does an insane amount of damage and is able to destroy basically any SCP in the game. However, this earlier version of the micro HID kind of made it look like this futuristic energy rocket launcher that would have maybe shot one singular projectile like the BFG from Doom or the Rhino from Ratchet & Clank, instead of this sort of laser lightning gun that we have in the game today. Unused OST. So this refers to 3, possibly more, music tracks developed by the SCP Secret Lab musical artist Jacek Fragic Rogal that have never been used in the game before. And by the way, sorry for that pronunciation. They're titled Unexplained Behaviors, Forget About Your Fears, and We Gotta Run, with the first 2 being ambient background tracks, while the last one is, well, it's a bit of a knee slapper in my opinion. I would highly suggest giving them all a listen sometime, and I've linked them all in the video description down below if you want to take a look at them. And here we get to the final level of the SCP Iceberg. This level has only 2 things on it, so let's get into them right away. Now, a lot of people in the Secret Lab community think Northwood are going to introduce a sort of cosmetic store into the game at some point for more solid base of income later down the line, where you could maybe purchase and/or unlock different skins for your characters or guns or other items in the game. However, what a lot of players don't know is that Northwood had already had a customization system in the game. In very early versions of the game, you were allowed to choose what D-boy you spawned in as. D-boy 55240 Jean Colos, the absolute goober we all know and love today, and the D-Girl 39410, Charlotte Riker, which spawned in with a janitor card, the lowest type of key card you could have in the game. This was scrapped, however, and as it stands, when you spawn in as a D-Class, you'll spawn in as the default 5524 model. But my eggs are still in the basket that we will be able to get those customizable and unlockable skins, whether it be through an in-game store or some other way, so that we could really express ourselves in-game. SCP-035 sightings. And the final item of the list is really the most puzzling one. See, up until this point, I had heard about nearly every single other item on this list, except for this one, SCP-035 sightings. Now, SCP-035 in the lore is an item that basically it'll attach onto someone when they pick it up and control them until it needs to find a new host. And in the current build of Secret Laboratory, this isn't in the game whatsoever. Data miners haven't even seen anything about SCP-035 in the game's code. There are some unofficial mods in community servers that have had their own hand at implementing 035 before, but nothing in any official capacity. So I did a bit of digging on this, and I had looked just about everywhere I could to see what this author was referencing when he was talking about 035 sightings in the game. And just when I was about to give up on my journey, my attention was turned back to the original Reddit post that Ryfith had made on the Iceberg. And would you believe it, the top comment in the Reddit thread was someone asking about the 035 sightings. And the original poster admits that he had only heard some rumors about this from, quote, no good sources in the most recent beta build of the game, but nothing that can be substantiated. So, yeah. Ta-da. So tell me your thoughts about the whole iceberg in the comments down below. Did you know everything on here, or is there something that you think should have been on here that wasn't? And then once again, thank you to Ryfith. Overall, in my opinion, this iceberg was really great. I loved looking at it and researching it and making this whole video. Also, thank you to everyone new who's been subbing lately. I mean, we hit 1,000 subs not too long ago on this channel, and then we hit 2,000 subs before I could make the thank you video for 1,000 subs, and now we're well over 3,000 subs, and it's blowing my mind, dude. You guys are literally the best. I love you. I'm going to keep making great content, and hopefully you guys keep liking it. You guys are the best. Take it easy.